Welcome to Current Events from a Biblical View. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the controversial topic of geoengineering, also known as weather modification or chemtrails. Here's a great example. The video you're seeing is one I shot just a few days ago while out on the Piankatank River. Those white trails, also known as contrails, are often mistaken for natural phenomenon, but they are actually chemtrails and part of geoengineering programs designed to manipulate the weather. Geoengineering, which for years was called just another conspiracy theory, can no longer be denied as there is clear and overwhelming evidence of their programs, as you're about to learn, and now expose it's being sold to the general public as a necessary tool to combat climate change. But could these covert programs have catastrophic consequences for the environment and humanity? Stay tuned as we'll hear from whistleblowers, uncover the facts, the science, and the dangers behind these programs. Plus, we'll explore how it all ties into biblical prophecy and what we need to know. And be sure to watch until the end for some great news about a federal takedown of the chemtrail program themselves.
State Department whistleblower William Blum once said, "No matter how paranoid or conspiracy-minded you are, what the government is actually doing is worse than you imagine."
Perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world is the condensation trail lie. What we're seeing in our skies is not condensation. It's sprayed particulate dispersions with very few exceptions.
They shouldn't be there. Jet engines burn clean. So if there's anything coming out of them, it's an additive.
They're absolutely not contrails. Contrails do not linger, dissipate, and go into cloud coverage, period, in the report.
And I kept saying to people, what is this? Because now the sky is no longer blue, it's starting to turn gray. And what I found was it's kind of like it was not socially acceptable. We're all going to pretend this is not really happening. And I thought, oh, this is very bad.
We are officially told that the aircraft-emitted trails in our skies that linger, spread, and sometimes cover the entire horizon are just condensation. But the condensation trail narrative is perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world. It is not possible. This engine, a high-bypass turbofan jet engine, this is the engine that is on all military tankers and all commercial carriers, is in essence a jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through this engine is non-combusted. This engine, by design, is nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. And we have film footage of aircraft flying at altitude with nozzles visible, turning on and off. That is the end of the argument. Since even before man could fly, there was an effort to try to modify the weather. We have weather modification patents going back 100 years plus. Even today, we are being told, falsely, by the climate science community that we have one final card to play to try to avert total climate collapse, total planetary meltdown. But this is, in fact, a lie. Climate engineering, weather modification patents go back more than 100 years. But all available data indicates that programs were first deployed at scale immediately after World War II and deployed over the polar regions in the attempt to increase the size of the polar ice packs and thus try to regulate Earth's temperatures.
It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Climate engineering is the crown jewel of the military-industrial complex. Climate engineering has been used to destabilize and topple nations all over the globe, facilitating military occupations by hostile countries like the U.S.
I want to tell you that we're in very great danger from the pollution that's coming down over us. And we've been led astray by the military-industrial complex, and they're responsible for the cloud's creation and weather manipulation programs.
Then you see these bands of very distinct cloud cover moving into the region. That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff, small bits of aluminum. Sometimes it's made of plastic or even metallicized paper products, but it's used as an anti-radar issue, and obviously they're up there practicing. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
Governments all over the globe and the entire climate science community are telling the population urgently that climate engineering operations, solar radiation management operations need to be immediately deployed to try to mitigate the warming of our planet, to try to preserve what's left of its life support systems. And yet when the public, those that are awake, try to bring to the attention of academia and elected officials that we see climate engineering already being conducted in our skies all over the globe. It's already been deployed. Lab tests prove it. Film footage proves it. Documents prove it. And yet we have the continued denial from the climate science community and official agencies telling us that we're not really seeing what we're seeing in the skies. They tell us if climate engineering were deployed, it would look exactly like what we're seeing in our skies. But then again, they tell us that we're not really seeing what we are actually seeing. The paradox is the more the climate engineers spray the planet, destroy the ozone layer, disrupt the hydrological cycle, and increase the overall warming of the planet, the more they feel they have to ramp these programs up to try to mitigate some of the damage that these programs have done in the first place. That is the true definition of insanity.
As a society, we are like a freight train heading for a broken bridge that is just a few years away from us. And I think people don't understand the exponential increase of toxicity in the environment.
These operations should be considered the most insane endeavor ever deployed by the human race. These operations are systematically derailing all of Earth's life support systems in the attempt to blot out the sun. The myopic, short-term objective of trying to cool the planet while worsening the overall warming. The climate engineers, if these operations are allowed to continue, are pounding the nails into our collective coffins.
From a scientific perspective, and what we know about nanomaterials and their effect on human health and the environment, this is a serious problem. And it really does warrant further scientific investigation.
We need the answers to get to the bottom of this national security problem.
If populations around the globe find out what has been done to them by their governments without their knowledge or their consent, there will be a shockwave around the globe that cannot be contained by the criminal governments that have now taken control of our planet and civilizations all over the world.
Just bringing transparency will shift so many things that it will make it extremely difficult, because you cannot manage an entire planet with overt force, only with covert force. If we bring transparency to who it is in the covert force, it shifts everything.
Numerous government documents posted at geoengineeringwatch.org, some as much as 800 pages long, prove that global governments, even governments that the public perceives as being adversarial, are in fact colluding and cooperating on the climate engineering issue due to the cross-border ramifications. You can't climate engineer over your own country without affecting the entire planet. They are all working together on these issues, and other governments around the globe are either actively or passively cooperating.
There are 172 bills before the U.S. Senate right now calling for more weather modification programs.
A Weather Modification Act calling for research in, quote, attempting to change or control by artificial methods the natural development of atmospheric cloud form.
The stated goal of some of the world's most recognized geoengineers, like Dr. David Keith and Dr. Ken Caldera, is to put 10 to 20 million tons of nanoparticulates into global skies annually. That's an inconceivable amount of material. This material is on top of industrialized pollution.
Right? This is about how we engineer the planet. It's about the fact, an uncomfortable fact, but it is a fact, that we have the technical ability to do this. They are all fast-acting, they are cheap, and they are fundamentally imperfect. They're the problems of how you control something where an individual country can have tremendous leverage over the whole planet's climate, and where there are winners and losers in ways that really could be unpredictable. And I mean, not to frighten you, but I think you can imagine scenarios that lead to war.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering. that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection.
There's all sorts of ways you could do this, but the standard idea has always been spray sulfuric acid in the stratosphere 20 kilometers over our head and use that to stop the planet warming up.
The example many people cite was when the Mount Pinatubo volcano exploded. And all of this ash went into the air and had a cooling effect on the Earth.
And so people have long proposed since the mid-60s that you could artificially add dust to the stratosphere and cool the planet. Not that this would be a good solution for global warming, it would not. But it does show the way we're steadily developing the powers to manipulate the planet with comparative ease. If it was aerosols in the stratosphere, it would likely be put there by airplanes. Start with a fleet of just 2 or 3 kind of modified business jets. The basic idea is that if you let a plume off in an aircraft by just changing some little details, you can actually get much smaller particle size distributions by doing this kind of spraying. So there are all sorts of side effects. I'll get to them in a second. But if you put sulfuric acid in the stratosphere, for example, you could deplete stratospheric ozone. Smaller size means more surface area, but more surface area means less ozone.
Well, is this stuff in the stratosphere going to be killing some number of people that are going to be sacrificed?
It's an obvious concern.
If it kills 1 million people and we're only doing out 1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
Well, you can do math.
Okay.
But that's, so killing people is not the objective here. So if I made a decision, or if there was a collective decision to do a geoengineering program, and you put, say, the kind of program I think makes more sense to put about 1 million tons a year in, but let's say, you might end up killing many tens of thousands of people a year as the direct result of that decision.
And so the only thing that we can do to cool the planet, or that society can do to cool the planet, is deploy these sorts of technology.
And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard. It's more like free riding on our blankets. And it means there are going to be winners and losers, just like there are winners and losers for CO2, but they're different winners and losers. So this makes the problem, if anything, harder to solve. You've introduced another dimension of complexity into the managing the planet's climate problem.
The ongoing global climate engineering operations must be considered a new Manhattan Project on a scale that is almost inconceivable. Governments all over the globe are either actively or passively participating in the ongoing climate engineering insanity, all for their own reasons, all in the attempt to keep business as usual until the last possible moment.
So we're here with Kristen Megan. She's a military veteran, right?
Yes, I was in the U.S. Air Force for 9 years.
Wow. And you came out and blew the whistle on geoengineering, things that you witnessed were going on. Can you give us the real nutshell?
Absolutely. Basically, I had heard of what many people know as the term chemtrails. And I worked in a job called bioenvironmental engineering. And I thought that was insane. And why would we do something like that? Modify the weather by using hazardous materials in our atmosphere. So, and actually the process of trying to debunk it or disprove it, I realized it was actually coming right out of my office, as I was one of the people that was approving the chemicals. And it really shook the core of my oath. And I did a lot of sampling, did a lot of investigation, and I blew the whistle and I got out. And I've now used my credentials, my oath, and my powers for good to help people understand it's very real. It's now openly admitted.
When you say you had chemicals being pumped into the air, what kind of chemicals are they putting out that rain down on humanity, basically?
Nanoparticulate metals, like you had different sulfates and barium and strontium. I know it's probably changed over time. I know they use silver iodide for certain things, but these are the odd part of it was the quantities that I saw them coming in, the form that they were coming in. And it's the same type of materials that I was trying to engineer out of the workplace to substitute with safer materials. And when you notice that what's called the safety data sheet, the information about a chemical of what personal protective equipment to wear, how do you dispose of it, how do you pack it to ship it? When key information is missing, I ask questions. And my questions led to demonization, and I knew I found something I shouldn't have.
That's insane. So these metals are basically toxic for the humans, I would presume, or?
Yes, because it also has aluminum. And a lot of people will tell you, well, these things aren't horrible in small quantities. It's not small quantities, because when you are putting things above us, the dissipation rates are dependent on weather and climate, but it's getting into the food, it's getting into the soil. And around the world, these wastewater treatment plants, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, or these toxicants is what they're called, they are not able to filter them out. So if you're growing organic food, it's Are we going to go back to the plexiglass barriers on our plants? I mean, it's horrible. That's why you can ban it anywhere. We've had states in the United States ban it, and that is great to get the ball rolling. But people really need to wake up to it, irrespective of any political party. It's not okay. And you're seeing a huge increase in neurodegenerative issues like Alzheimer's.
So all of us have a consequence that we may not be aware of. And it is important for all of us to join together and to put a stop to these programs and to hold public discussions on them for as much as possible. And I want all of you to know that it's important that we realize that this is not normal and natural, that these are programs, experimental programs that are being conducted at this time, and we all have to stand up and say no.
Now, I told you to stick around until the end for some good news. President Donald J. Trump, together with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has declared full-scale war on chemtrail geoengineering programs operating over the U.S. skies. What was once dismissed as conspiracy theory is now being officially recognized as a national security threat and a crime against humanity. A new federal task force has been formed with executive authority to investigate, expose, and arrest all actors involved in chemical aerosol spraying operations. This announcement marks a historic pivot in U.S. policy from denial to actually direct confrontation. And the Trump RFK alliance is not requesting cooperation, it is demanding justice. The mission is called Operation Skywatch, and it's already underway. You see, the climate global warming scam, because that's what it really is no more than an organized global plot to manipulate and control nations, leading to global governance and a new world order that the book of Revelation actually exposes. In Revelation 11:18, it calls the people behind these types of plan the destroyers or corruptors of the earth. And I certainly identify this type of activity to the future plan revealed in Revelation 11:18. And the Trump administration is bringing justice, and we trust a stop to these destructive programs. I told you that is really good news. And here's another insightful thought today from the Word of God that I'm going to leave you with. Many times when we see things like this, our heart sinks because we say things like this, oh my God, what are they trying to do? Poison us, kill us? Well, that is really their plan. But as children of God, I remind you today from Isaiah 54:17, it says, no weapon formed against us shall prosper, and every tongue rise up against us, we shall condemn. So speak the word of God only, and know this, that justice is finally arriving on the scene to do something to what needs to be stopped, and we can be thankful for both. And until next time, I'm your host.